wait for the yellow light. And here, I think we're recording now, but no yellow light.
Mine says live.
There it is.
Mine's yellow.
Okay, well, there's a little blue thing that's over the top of mine, but it says live now. So, people, hello, Internet friends. This is MagicBrad, SynergyCafe, and the Synergy Collaborative, and we're doing this series on the topic of meditation. And today, the topic is what is the science behind meditation, which I think this is going to be intriguing because I think a lot of people go back and forth with the spiritual end or the scientific proof and all that kind of thing. So, my friend Damon Dickinson, are you there?
Hey, Brother Brad, I am indeed.
He is. Yay! So we're both, like I mentioned, down here in Asheville, and we're having a cold snap. I can't believe it. It's below zero down here in Asheville. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we actually have some snow and ice, too, which we've had very little of this winter.
So speaking of the topic today, the science behind meditation, could we get a bunch of people together to meditate for warmth in Asheville and cause that to happen scientifically?
There are some studies that would postulate that there is some potential to being able to infect our environment based on our collective intention and consciousness, focusing on a shared collective intent.
Our mutual connection, Gregg Braden, talked about that. I think
Yes.
when the 9/11 thing happened, there was a big spike in consciousness.
Yeah, I think is it the Global Heart Initiative?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, really, and he's in a bit being a spokesperson for HeartMath because they're the ones that came up with that data, and they've got some amazing data around the science of meditation and specifically heart-based meditation, which I really is my favorite at this point after having spent the last 25 plus years exploring and experimenting and practicing some very diligently forms of meditation. Heart's where it's at. And I kind of crossed over yesterday and started getting into more sort of the scientific side when we were talking about the benefits instead of keeping it a little simple.
Well, that was probably happened that way because today we're talking about what is the science behind meditation. So
yeah.
So let's talk about that. What is there any science behind meditation, or is
well, yeah, just coming back to that topic you brought up of what Gregg Braden was mentioning in HeartMath was, and you can I know you can go to heartmath.org and they have like the actual documentation and figures on everything. But the basic story is when 9/11 hit, there are, I think it was NASA, and there were a couple other, maybe it was the atmospheric weather, what do they call it? It's the big atmosphere monitoring national system, and I think it's in Colorado. But they measure all of the different atmospheric pressure and UV and all of the different variables that go into our atmosphere that keep us alive here on the planet. And when 9/11 hit, there was this huge measurable spike way off the graph of norm that took place in our actual atmosphere. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember exactly which variable it was that shifted, but there was a measurable change in the atmosphere. And what they discovered was, and I think it was shortly after the event, was that there were people praying for the accident, the event that happened. And so they took that data and then they did an experiment, HeartMath did an experiment, and now there's actually a movement around it. The Global Heart Movement, I believe, is meditating, heart-based meditation on a monthly basis. I believe they do it around the moon phase to kind of capitalize on the moon's influence as well. And they're affecting the planet. And so there's this direct correlation, they believe, between our minds and our consciousness and our hearts and the atmosphere of the planet as the planet's consciousness. So if we're focusing on our collective intentions, then it's actually changing the whole planet's consciousness and grid. So that was pretty cool. There are some, some of the earlier studies when the Beatles kind of brought Eastern meditation over to our Western culture through the Maharishi, which is what most people think of as meditation today. He was sharing the transcendental meditation technique, and he was very much into having it validated by science. So they did do a lot of neurofeedback and brain wave and heartbeat analysis, actually put on the EEG and EKG monitors and put people into, let people meditate and then measure the differences. And this is where I was talking yesterday about, measurable differences in heart blood pressure, heart rate synchronizing, lowering, the actual sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems relaxing, and then the brain waves themselves actually changing very measurably from one state to another, from very high beta conscious thinking into alpha, theta, and delta states, deeper and deeper states of relaxation, almost into states of deep sleep, but with still being conscious.
So that's the measurement of the meditation via science. Is there some other statistics and things of meditation actually affecting science or affecting the measurements?
Yeah, I believe it was also the Maharishi Institute who also started doing peace studies. So they would have collective groups basically doing active prayer and meditation for peace in high war zone areas in the world. And I know there was one that was done, in the 80s and 90s with Israel and Pakistan, and that there were the exact times that they were praying, there was a measurable lowered activity in the amount of violence being taken place and being reported during that period of time. And I even think it was following like the next 12 to 24 hours, there was a lower measurable difference in the amount of actual shootings and violence being reported in those areas. So there is believed to be a direct correlation, and they put quite an extensive study. And you know what? The more we talk about the science, the more it makes me want to go find those references and like validate them, like put some links up somewhere where we can have them and people can read them instead of just taking my word for it. But those are the ones that I'm aware of.
Well, the nice thing about posting this on the internet and on a blog and things, I can always add those things later. So
yeah,
if anybody doesn't know what we do with these, they go up to YouTube, and then I take the YouTube videos and put them on blog posts and propagate them out to the internet so that people can find them, and right. I'm able to change that when we need to do that. Yeah. And I was going to mention, I've got this app. It's called the Insight Timer. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's kind of light. But this is an app where you can select meditations, and then after it's done, you can see how many people you meditated with around the world. It's got this little map.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I can relate to that. Now,
I want to speak to one other thing real quick, or you have another question?
Keep what you had in mind. I do have a question. When you talked about meditating with the moon phases, don't the moon phases change every place in the world? I mean, every place in the world doesn't have a full moon when it's the full moon over here.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I imagine most of the Global Heart Initiative are national, even though it is an international organization. I believe they're going with the United States view of the moon.
And I think if you did something like that, even if it was global, it would go around with the cycle, I guess. But it wouldn't be all at the same time. It'd be Greenwich Mean Time or whatever.
Right.
So what was your thought?
So I think what's most important, more than the actual measurable science, although there are a lot of people, who are very intellectual and appreciate those measurements and what they represent, I think it's really important for each person to get their own direct experience. All the intellectual value is minimal in its effectiveness compared to just trying it yourself and seeing what the effects are.
Well, it's true, unless you're going to get into something like telekinesis or psychokinesis where you're moving things and doing this poltergeist kind of stuff.
Right.
It's an individual feeling that a person gets when they meditate.
Yeah, and that's why I really appreciate more and more the open heart prayer meditation, because it is so tangible and so consistent. Even that first time I shared it with you, it was very, very, it was almost instantaneous. You could feel it, and you can tell. And I'd say 99% plus people have a very immediate effect and experience from it.
It is, because it is about how you feel as opposed to how you think. I mean, when a person, it's how your brain is working isn't really relevant to how you're feeling in the morning. You might think it's a crummy day, but it's really just feels like a crummy day.
Well, that's an interesting subject, because I do believe our thoughts are one of the main filters and influencers of our emotion. It can go back and forth. I mean, we're holistic beings. If we're physically sick, that can affect our mood. It can also affect our thinking. If we're in a negative thinking place, it's going to affect our mood and could affect our physical body.
But that's what I mean. Like when you think, I have a headache, I don't want a headache, you're still thinking headache.
Right.
I have a headache.
Sure.
But when you just go right to the heart and you start feeling happy, you feel happy.
Right, and the interesting thing with our hearts and the open heart meditation is a lot of times, regardless of what I'm thinking, if I just touch my heart and smile to my heart, the light, gentle, joyous feeling is there regardless. And part of my belief around that, from my experience, is that love, especially divine love or Creator's love, because I believe that's where our heart is directly connected to, and what we're experiencing is not even our love, but the Creator's, is the great transmuter. That frequency of love transmutes all the other frequencies and entrains them. So if I've got grief, if I've got anger, if I've got impatience, if I've got fear going on, if I tune into the love, it literally, that vibration entrains and overrides and transmutes those, raises those vibrations. Same with the mind. It'll entrain the mind, and HeartMath has some actual measurable science on this, because you look at just the physical machines that measure our heart and our brains, and the voltage used for measuring the brain signals are in millivolts. The actual heart is in volts. So it's literally 10, or is it 100? I'm trying to remember what milli is, because I don't know my metrics that well anymore. Literally, it's 10 to 100 times more powerful just in its electrical impulse than the brain. Now, what they've also discovered is there's a magnetic field that's measurable around the brain and around the heart. And for some people, the greatest distance that magnetic resonance around the brain is, that they can measure this field, is about 12 inches. Now, in the heart, that field is measurable up to 8 feet around the body. So what that tells me is that the heart is literally 8 to 10 times more powerful in its ability to both electrically and magnetically entrain the rest of the body and being. So the mind, when the heart's open and it's fully active, very easily, very gracefully can entrain the mind and just bring it into a very calm and peaceful and positive place. And that's why the heart is so powerful, and why I love, working with the heart.
Earlier on, you had mentioned something about how the heart has its own, thinking consciousness, kind of like
its own wisdom. Yes.
Yeah. So does it have different places in it? Like there's the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain and the frontal lobe and all that.
We're getting into a much deeper subject here.
It's a science. It says so right there.
Well, I mean, if you look at the physical heart, there is a left and a right. There's actually 4 quadrants to the heart. And so
I wonder if science has looked into any parts of the heart that do certain things, like different types of emotion, like if sadness is held in one part of the heart.
Well, I mean, if you look at the physical heart, there's a couple of different things happening. There's the 4 quadrants, the physical parts, and they do appear to be mainly a form of pump to bring in blood and to pump out blood. And the rhythm, that pumping action of all 4, when they're in synchronous, makes that pumping action. The part most people aren't aware of is that there are actually 7 layers of muscle that make up the heart, and they crisscross, they overlap in a way. And what they discovered was a very, very unique form of muscle tissue that the heart is made of, that there are actual crystals, crystalline structures, crystalline cellular structures embedded within the fiber of muscles. So when the heart is pumping, the physical organ of the heart is pumping, those crystals are striking in such a way that they're creating their own frequency, their own resonance. And that's pretty wild.
Sounds pretty wild.
Yeah. I believe HeartMath has a lot of that. And I remember one of the places that I had first read that was with Dan Winter. He wrote several books. One's called Alphabet of the Heart. It was one of the first ones he wrote, talking about the heart as a sacred organ. And then we're talking about the spiritual heart, which is a whole nother subject. And it's not scientifically verifiable or measurable, but we can feel it. And that's the difference. I believe our being has much more sensitive instruments of measurement than physical instruments are allowed to do. They're only going to, I believe, physical science is only going to be able to bring us halfway. If you look at and read one of my favorite books and teachers and speakers who's passed into spirit now, which was Dr. David Hawkins, and he's not the same as the other Stephen Hawkins. It's Dr. David Hawkins. He wrote a book called Power versus Force, and it's one of my favorite books. And within that book, one of the biggest contributions that came from that book is a relative scale of consciousness that he created. And it has 4 different variables to it, and it's a scale of 0, a relative scale from 0 to 100 in frequency. 0 being at like complete unconsciousness, you've got hate, and you've got like shame, fear, hate, all these different emotions, and then you come up the scale of vibration. Love is literally at 500. And right below love is 400 to 500s are the intellectualism. So that's our intelligence. And he said, at that level of intellectualism, we can understand everything there is to know about a kiss. We can measure it. We can measure the electrical impulses. We can measure that. But until we actually have a kiss, our own, so we have the objective and then we have the subjective. And until we reach 500, love is just an objective theory that we can theorize about. But when we actually have the experience is when it becomes subjective, and it's only from 500 to 1,000 that we have to leave our minds behind and actually venture into the realm of spirit. And he talked about some of the greatest minds, Einstein, Jung, Bohm, actually alluded to these things, like you can only go so far, and then you have to allow your imagination, the spirit to guide you into the next realms of understanding.
That's pretty deep. That's probably a topic for a whole nother.
It is, but I mean, it's just talking about science of meditation and how far that can take us in validating its benefits and how it's serving us. Yeah.
Well, we've already been some time. Again, I don't like to keep these too long, so let's kind of close this one off. And
yeah,
is there anything else you want to add before?
Just try it out for yourself. That's the best thing. And HeartMathInstitute.org. If you guys want some more information, that's a great place to just Google and look up. They've got some great free information on a lot of the subjects that we talked about today. Or you can look up Gregg Braden. He's a great speaker too. I love him.
Okay, Damon, appreciate it again, and people for watching. If you want to learn more, and you can find somewhere around this video how to connect with Damon or myself.
And actually, I mentioned I do have some videos and some of that information on my website, and I'm gonna make a point to go on and add some more links, because I actually have some of HeartMath stuff and put it up on my blog. So heartmeditationforbeginners.com, you can find some of that info on my blog.
Perfect, and that is on your little nameplate there, your lower third, as they say.
The lower third.
Okay, well again, appreciate it. Peace, love, and happiness. MagicBrad signing off. SynergyCafe, Synergy Collaborative, and Damon Dickinson. Thanks, Damon.
Bye, guys. Thanks, Brad.